Hello and welcome to SPORTSWOMEN Australia, a podcast celebrating the up-and-coming and bona fide stars of Australian sportswomen and the female power brokers behind the scenes. Tiffany Cherry joining you alongside my fabulous co-host Amanda Salanti. Our next guest is an absolute legend of Australian sport. In fact, she is Australia's most successful Paralympian. Louise Sauvage, it's wonderful to have you join us. Before we say a proper hello, I'm just going to read a touch of what you've achieved. You're a 9-time Paralympic champion, 11-time world champion. You've won 4 Boston marathons, Commonwealth Games silver medal. You've basically won everything from sprint all the way to the marathon. And just recently, in fact last week, you were inducted into the Sports Australia Hall of Fame as a legend, a bona fide legend, and the first Paralympic athlete to be inducted as a legend. Welcome to our podcast.
Thank you very much.
It's funny because we were trying to clarify one of your achievements, and you couldn't even remember whether what was the you didn't even know what the answer was. So is it kind of a bit like that? There's been so many achievements, and that's just a snippet of what you've achieved. Does it just sort of seem like a bit of a blur for you?
Oh, it's a while ago now, but no, I mean, obviously there's some great memories there, and the big ones are just, they'll never fade from my memory, that's for sure.
Can I just ask you, the first one as a 16-year-old, you competed at the World Championships. You won your first race in world record time. Does that stand out as a significant moment in your achievements?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, I didn't know what I was getting into back then. But, yeah, it was fantastic. First international competition, and I just thought, oh, that's all right. Good way to start. It was pretty awesome.
So you mentioned that, some of them do stand out more than others. What would be, say, your top 3 standouts from your illustrious career?
Ooh, in the road racing, it would have to be Boston, definitely Boston Marathon, and just the saga that continued. I did that 9 years in a row, and, it took me 5 years to win the bloody thing. But, yeah, so that would have to be one on the road. But obviously a big standout was Sydney 2000, not only for, my achievements, but for it being in Australia and probably one of the biggest turning points in Paralympic history. So, there's a lot of different things that go with those games. So that would have to be one of the biggest ones as well.
And why was it one of the biggest turning points from your perspective and your explanation?
For me, I'd been in Atlanta 4 years earlier, and it was not well represented, and there was no publicity, and I could count the people in the stands on one hand, and it was just so awful. And I just couldn't believe that, the US got it so wrong. And, by the time, we already knew that Sydney was going to have the games, and I was so determined that people were going to come to our games and experience it, know what the sports were, and really, appreciate it for what it was, and, for the sport and the athletes and the athleticisms. And it was just fantastic to see people come and enjoy it. And, the basketball and the rugby was just packed. And, I had international athletes coming up to me, and, we're on the front page, the back page of the paper, on the news every night, and they're just like, this is unheard of. It was just so unheard of for Paralympic sport. So I think it was a big, turning point in Paralympic history.
So let's take it right back to where it all started for you. Was it always wheelchair racing, or were there other sports that you were really interested in growing up?
As a junior, I did everything, and I think lots of people do that to figure out what they like and what they don't like and what they're good at. I competed in the track races. I did the field events. I did basketball. I was a very good swimmer initially. And so I did everything that I could, anything I could get my hands on pretty much as a junior. And then specialised, as I got older, I just did the basketball, and I did a bit of athletics as well. And then just went into wheelchair racing because it was an individual sport, and I loved speed. And if anyone knows me, I'm just slightly competitive. So, yeah, it was definitely a natural progression into track and road racing.
So can we break that down just a little bit further? So, what else really drew you in with that wheelchair racing other than the fact of being an individual event?
I think I did enjoy it just being able to see how far I was the only one in control of how far I could push myself both physically and mentally, and it was a lot harder than pushing an everyday chair or a basketball chair. It was a lot harder in terms of the technique and being really good at it. So it was something that I really had to work at. So I suppose, I love a challenge, so that really drew me in as well. And, I had a good squad to train with, and, it was just, I suppose, a number of things that it was great. I loved it.
What about the evolution of the wheelchair in terms of the track and the road wheelchair? When you first started, it wasn't much different to just the normal wheelchair that people would manoeuvre themselves around in.
Yeah, my first race chair, I've got some photos. They're pretty hideous, but yeah, I would get speed wobble on the front wheels, and it was weighed a ton. It was made of chromoly. It was very heavy and not very aerodynamic at all. But I thought I was the ant's pants. But going from that as an 8 or 9 year old, the chairs progressed and they're made of aluminium and more specific wheels, and obviously went to carbon fibre, and the chair actual design has changed a fair bit since I started racing, obviously. But yeah, the chairs are evolution in itself. They've changed quite a bit, and also the different components that we use now, including the gloves. My athletes now use 3D printed gloves, so wow. It's very different to when I was racing and I made my own. So yeah, things have changed a lot more, and obviously the guys are a lot faster now too.
So has there ever been a winged keel wheelchair? Like, has there ever been sort of the secret weapon of a wheelchair?
Yeah, I don't know whether there's been a winged keel kind of version, but there is a nice chair out there now that's beyond our means at the moment. It's a full carbon chair, and it's all scanned, and it's really moulded and fitted to you, and it's fantastic, but a bit out of our price range at the moment, but you never know. It might become a bit more common soon, so that'd be great.
Yeah, accessible.
So Tiff mentioned before that you've had success at quite a number of distances in the wheelchair racing, from right down from 100 metres right up to marathon distance. How did you prepare your body to be able to endure such different events?
I started off in the shorter events. So I started off in the sprints, as a junior and progressed up. And, I was pretty quick when I first started. I can't get going now, but but I definitely, changed a lot of my training and my diet and everything to be able to do the longer stuff. So that I did change. I never competed in the short and the long at one game, so to speak, or in one cycle. So I did change a lot of training and a lot of things to be able to do the marathon distance and to be competitive. It didn't happen overnight, that's for sure.
And you were born with a congenital condition, which meant that you were always going to be in a wheelchair. Is that correct? And also, Louise, your parents' influence as a young kid, they were just determined that you were going to be active.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure they determined that. I think I did. I was a very active kid, couldn't keep me still. I was born with my disability. It's basically where the spinal cord didn't form properly. It doesn't have an official name. I'm a bit of this and a bit of that, unfortunately. What's on the internet's not quite correct, but yeah, it's not really stopped me from doing anything. If you know the spinal column, it's about T11, T12, and you could say I'm incomplete. So I do have some movement and some feeling as well. So I'm a bit all over the place, really. But yeah, been in a chair my whole life, and I don't really know any different, to be honest.
So I've heard Dylan Alcott say this, and obviously Kurt Fearnley's another big name and famous Paralympian. But Dylan has said that he wouldn't wish it any other way, the fact that he's in a wheelchair, because it's given him so many opportunities and he loves his life. Is that how you feel about yours?
Yeah, I mean, Dylan also was, had his disability from a very young age, so he doesn't, I suppose, the same as me. I don't know any different, and for what it has given me and the life that I've had is just phenomenal. And no, I have no regrets, and I wouldn't want to change it in any other way. I wouldn't have done half the things I've done if I didn't have a disability. So no, I wouldn't change it either. No, I'm with Dylan on that one.
So what are you talk when you do public speaking, you talk about barriers and challenges and overcoming those. What have been then the biggest barriers and challenges for you?
I suppose in everyday life, obviously I use a wheelchair, so the things that are very difficult is just the common access and people's attitudes, unfortunately, sometimes. I suppose that's something that I've dealt with my whole life. And within sport, there's been a lot of different things. When I first started out, I'd be on the human interest pages of the paper, or, I wouldn't really be in the sports section, and people just thought it was fantastic that I was kind of getting out there and having a go. So it wasn't seen as something that was, could be professional, or that, I trained bloody hard for. So it's those kind of things, I suppose, that you're forever striving for, the equality in that means. But in everyday life, it is access and just, different things that you have to challenge in people's attitudes. And it's a lot better now than it ever has been. But, sometimes you get a curveball and I don't know what to say half the time. I'm a little bit in shock. And you think of something really smart-ass later on. But,
always.
Yeah, I know. But that's probably the most common things is just, people and general access for me.
So then in terms of the general access and in terms of that improving, I think let's just sort of switch more to the mainstream community rather than just the sport. How is it improving?
I think it's come a long way. There's a lot more laws in Australia, although they're not as tight as some other countries, but that they can't get away with a lot of things in terms of not having access, which is fantastic for me. And it's not just me. I mean, obviously for me it's physical access, but there's lots of other people with different disabilities that just struggle, and it's just small things that people don't think of, or, I'm constantly adapting to a world that's not built for me. So, when things change or, they think it's much better, it's like sometimes it's not, which is unfortunate. But it's really hard to cater for everyone. And I can't speak for other people that, have different disabilities to myself. I'm sure they get frustrated with so many other things than I do as well. But, I think people's attitudes, and we're not so much of an afterthought, that we're a thought in the planning process now, which is fantastic, and that's what needs to happen.
So we talk about physical aspects only really being part of your athletic performance and even just your day-to-day life. So how do you develop a mental strength to perform at an elite level, and even just the mental strength to, manage your daily life?
Yeah, I'm a pretty self-motivated person, which I think my athletes struggle with sometimes. I turn up and I'm a little bit more excited about the training session than they are. But yeah, I think it's a tough one. I did work with a lot of sports psychologists as an athlete, and my athletes do too now as well, just to combat so many different things in life now. I mean, I'm actually quite grateful that there wasn't a lot of social media when I was competing. Yeah. I think that would have done my head in. But I can see how athletes really struggle with a lot of things, a lot more things these days than they did in my time. But yeah, I think, as you said, you can be, and I truly believe this, you can be just as strong as the person next to you on the track, or, all the competitors out there. But if you don't have it mentally, then you're not going to win the race. You really need to be switched on. You really need to know what you're doing, focused, and, believe in yourself. And it's really hard to do. Elite sport is not for everyone, and that's fine too. But, so many things have to go right on the day for you to be able to achieve your goals. And, having the right headspace is one of those.
So you've obviously got a really good amount of mental strength in you. How do you encourage that in the athletes that you coach? How do you foster that in someone who might not already have that predisposition?
We obviously work with sports psychologists as well. But I think the communication is one of the biggest things. I'm lucky where, in terms of being a coach now, I have a kind of a greater communication level with some of the athletes, and they do with me as also because they know that I've already done this. They know that I know how they're feeling right now, and sometimes I can tell what they already need before they ask for it, so to speak, because they just know. And I think one of the best things I have with my athlete is to be honest and open. And, you know, we haven't got time. There's no time to be grumpy with each other and to stew on things. We've just got to get it done. And if something needs to be fixed or something needs to happen, then we'll make it happen. You know, we're not going to hurt each other's feelings. We're just going to get it done. And I think that's probably one of the biggest keys, is to have, you know, a great communication level to make things happen. You know, we're always looking for such small changes and such small improvements, and, you know, we can't mess around with, I suppose, you know, time. It's obvious, and so to speak, even though that's such a saying. But yeah, I think it can be a very difficult thing for some athletes to really have that motivation and to keep on track. It's yeah, I think in this environment too, in these days, it's even more difficult with so many pressures out there.
These are obviously things that you've learned all along the way, and you last year you were named New South Wales Coach of the Year, which is phenomenal. So that's a massive congratulations to you. But going back to when you were being coached, what was the one key lesson, if you can think of one, that you really took from a coach, or perhaps from a few of your coaches, that you're able to apply to get the best out of yourself?
Yeah, I think I learned a lot I had three main coaches, and I learned a lot from them of how I wanted to be a coach as well. My first coach ever was a guy called Frank Ponta, and I couldn't have wanted for a better mentor, a better coach. He went to the first Paralympics in 1960, and he really saw something in me that I had no clue about, and he taught me a lot of life lessons. And, you know, he was in a wheelchair also, and, you know, I think it's really important sometimes for people to really identify. It's really hard sometimes to identify with someone else who's not similar to you. And so for me to have him, he was, I suppose, very much someone that I could look up to, and he taught me not only about sport but a lot of life lessons and a lot of sportsmanship as well, and how to be, you know, how to be someone that, you know, obviously was very good at sport but also good at in life, and humble, and to really let my actions show rather than my words sometimes, you know, because that's what I needed to do in the sporting realm. And he was just so gentle and kind, and I took a lot of learnings from him, definitely. And from him and my other two major coaches, a lot of lessons learned and how I wanted to be a coach as well. So, yeah, it's interesting when you look back on it now. I probably didn't think about it until I became a coach.
Did you always know that that's where you were headed after you finished your career? Did you always think, I'd love to coach other people as well? Or did you only really focus on your experiences as an athlete at the time?
I knew I was going to have to retire in 2004 after Athens due to injuries and a number of things. And I actually really wanted to stay involved in my chosen sport. So I, you know, it's such a big part of your life, and I still wanted to stay involved. And so I did think that I would have a go at coaching. I didn't know if I'd be any good. It doesn't mean, you know, if you're a successful athlete, it doesn't mean, you know, you're going to be a good coach. But I did have a crack at it and thought, you know, it's a good challenge, definitely. And I think just being involved in someone else's journey and helping them achieve their goals, I thought I could, you know, play a good part in that. So, you know, I did try and set myself up. I did a number of courses and had coaching scholarships and things like that. So I did try really hard to see whether I could be good at it. And I had some really good mentors as well. So that really helped. And it turned out all right so far.
2004, you carried the Australian flag. What was that experience like?
That was amazing. You know, that I think they knew that obviously that was going to be my last games, and it was a huge honour. I remember coming out into the stadium, and yeah, it was mind blowing. It was really, really nice to be out there in front of the Australian team, and just so proud and honoured. And unfortunately, we didn't get to do the whole lap of the track, which my mother was extremely devastated by because she was on the other side. But yeah, it was one of the highlights, definitely. Just to know that, you know, I'd done this for, you know, 4 Paralympic Games, and this was my final one, and it was just a massive honour.
And then you go back 4 years earlier, and you spoke about it before, the Sydney, your home Olympics, lighting the cauldron, when you were told that was going to be your moment, and Kathy Freeman, who's my training partner. So I've been obviously in her mind in terms of how it went with her. But when you were told you were going to light that, and take us through the secrecy of it, and then actually the moment of doing it.
Well, I remember 4 years earlier in Atlanta, and a friend of mine had carried it there, and I just thought, wouldn't that be great? We're going to have Sydney and everything. I'd love to be one of the torchbearers and bring it into the stadium. And when I was selected to do that, it was under secrecy, the last, 6 torchbearers, and it was fantastic, and I was just overwhelmed. We were told only a few days before the opening, and we had to do rehearsals, and we were all so excited, and they said, well, don't you want to know who's lighting it? And we were all like, oh yeah. And they did tell us, what order we were going in, and I was the last one, and I wasn't allowed to tell anyone, which was quite hilarious. I didn't even tell my family, and back in the day they were videotaping it, and you can hear my mother on the tape, cheeky little bugger, she didn't even tell me. So it was so funny watching that back. But again, it was a massive honour, and something I didn't anticipate. I just thought it would be great to be able to carry it into the stadium, and just so proud to be Australian, and so proud to have the games here.
And was it smooth sailing, or was there any hitch in the process of it all?
It was actually pretty good, actually. I was there with the young girl that sang as well, and we were actually really close to the cauldron, because it was on ground level for us, and then it kind of went up to the big one at the top, and it was very warm. But it was good. No, it was fantastic. It didn't go off without a hitch, so it was really, really good.
So on the line of, Olympics and Paralympics, obviously at the moment they're two separate games. Would you like to see one day perhaps those two separate games merge together and be integrated as one?
My personal opinion is no. I think we need to have our own games. We need to be in our own spotlight. I think logistically it's probably impossible as well, to have all those events and house all those people and feed them and all that kind of thing. I don't think would really happen at all. And, the athletics and swimming and everything would go forever. But I think it would be too much. And I often think that we'd get lost within the able-bodied performances. And I think it's our time to shine. And I prefer the separate event, definitely. Definitely on that scale of the Paralympic level. I want to see it separate for sure.
And I mentioned in the intro last week you were named a legend of the Sports Australia Hall of Fame, of which you were the first Paralympian inducted back in 2007. So tell us about the night and Ash Barty being named the Don, two fabulous Australian women. One sort of, I suppose, more or less, not so much at the start of her career, but it's really just starting to blossom, and yours has the full stop on it. But what was that night like?
Yeah, it was huge. I've obviously been to a lot of the Hall of Fame dinners, and obviously there was a lot more going on for me that night. But it was a massive night. To be elevated was just a huge honour, and I'm actually part of the selection committee for the members to be inducted. So it's fantastic to see more and more people being inducted, and also the Don. And for me personally on the night, obviously the elevation and having my family and friends there was just brilliant. They live all over Australia, so it was great to have everyone in one spot. And just so honoured to be in that company and to be part of it. I'm very proud and just totally honoured to do it.
You've won so many things, including a Laureate Sports Award, the inaugural. You were World Sports Woman of the Year. Where does the legend status rank in all of that? I
think it'd have to be up there. It would just have to be on the pinnacle pretty much. I think to be inducted in the Sport Australia Hall of Fame is one thing, but to be elevated again is just another, altogether. There are a lot of awards that I have won, but I think the homegrown ones are the best. That night is just the sporting who's of who. It's just insane in that room. It's fantastic, and you just appreciate everyone in the room and what they've done for their sport and for themselves, and how much joy they've brought to so many people in watching them compete. And it's a wonderful feeling to be part of that and to be part of the membership, and it's just fantastic. And I had Dawn Fraser present to me, and I've known her for some time now, and it's just fantastic to call her my friend as well.
Are there any Australian female athletes that really stand out in your mind, potentially current athletes or previous athletes that you look at and you just think they're just one of the absolute greats, or you really looked up to, or potentially at the moment are still really interested in?
Oh, there's a lot of female athletes that I really enjoy watching. I really enjoy the sports. I'm a sports nut. I love watching and everything. I love going to live sport. There's just so many that I love seeing all the women's sport that you can now watch on TV, which is fantastic. From the cricket to the netball to a lot of the winter sports that we see now, which is great. We never used to get to see a lot of that. There's a lot of individuals that I really admire. There's a lot of members that are obviously inducted as well that I loved watching Melinda Gainsford-Taylor, for example. I loved watching Emma Carney. There's just so many athletes that are just, I love seeing them. They're just so athletic and strong and powerful and, just dominating their sport. It's just phenomenal. I love it.
I'm with you, Louise, definitely. So final question from me. From that young teenager back in 1992, Barcelona Paralympics, where you won a hat-trick of gold medals. Can you describe that young girl then and what she's evolved into?
I suppose she was very naive and had no idea where she would be going. The first Paralympic Games that I ever went to was just, again, it was just massive. And again, I didn't know what I was getting myself into and where it would lead to. And you see some of the interviews that I did with Paul Karen-Tai from the ABC. She'd ask me a question, I'd be, yes, no.
The worst nightmare.
I was making her work hard, poor Karen. So I suppose I've evolved a lot more and just seen what the Paralympic movement's all about and what it can actually do for a person. And, something for me, I just want to pay it forward and make a full circle. My goal now is to have more athletes involved and, let them have the experience and the opportunities that I had and even more now. And so that's probably my goal. And so I suppose along the way I've learnt so much and, giving back is probably one of the best things that I could ever do now.
Well, Louise, there's no doubt you've definitely paved the way, not only for Australian women, sportswomen, but across the world. As I said in the intro, you are without doubt Australia's most successful Paralympian, and it's been an absolute honour to have you, a new legend of the Sports Australia Hall of Fame, chatting with us on Sportswomen Australia on our podcast. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, and thank you for all the support. It's really appreciated, and it's fantastic that you're giving everyone a go. And I said before, I love sport and women's sport especially. Yeah, it's fantastic. Thank you very much for everything.
Well, tell all your friends to tune in to our podcast, and all the best with your athletes as well. Thanks, Louise.
Thank you very much.
And you can follow us too at Sportswomen Australia on Instagram and Facebook, and on Twitter at SportsWomen AU.